Imagine having the time and money to follow your passions and live life on your own terms. Welcome to Podcasting Mastery, where you'll learn the secrets of podcasting your way to a stress-free lifestyle. Let's grab a cool tropical drink and then join James and the Turtle in the Secret Beach Hut Studio.
Yes, this is James Martell, and I am tucked into the Secret Beach Hut Studio, and I'm very glad you've decided to join us today. This week, we will be continuing our conversation about developing a lifestyle business so we can all spend less time doing business and more time enjoying our families, more time traveling, and more time doing all of the things that matter to us most. It's for these reasons we focus on strategies for both developing a passive monthly income stream and passive ways of developing new clients and customers for your business. So with this in mind, today I am with Jasper Ribbers, host of Get Paid for Your Pad podcast. And today we're going to be talking with Jasper about how to turn your empty house into an Airbnb moneymaker to fund your world travels. Airbnb, as you are probably aware, offers a very unique opportunity for laptop nomads and adventure seekers on the go. And so today we're going to dig in and talk to Jasper and get the inside scoop on Airbnb and how to make money, and I guess the most money, from renting your pad from somebody who does exactly that. And of course, we're going to talk with Jasper about his adventure travels. So if you've dreamed about maybe living in Thailand for 6 months or maybe a year, heading off to Spain and maybe taking in the Mediterranean Sea, backpacking through Europe, or exploring Central America, or any adventure that you've had on your mind, you're definitely in the right place. Now, before Jasper joins us, just a quick invitation, if you haven't done so already, to subscribe to Podcasting Mastery to unleash your podcasting potential with expert interviews from some of the top podcasters on the planet. If you happen to be on our website, or in a podcasting directory such as iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or TuneIn, or maybe you're on our YouTube channel, I invite you to take just a moment and click on the subscribe button now. Now, Jasper has spent the last 8 years traveling the world to over 80 countries and having amazing adventures. Jasper is the founder again of Get Paid for Your Pad, and who has been traveling the world renting out his apartment on Airbnb and earning in the area of 60,000 euros a year from his listing. Jasper also has started a website, podcast, and created educational courses on how to help people maximize income from their Airbnb properties. Jasper, welcome to Podcasting Mastery.
Thanks for having me, James.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. I always love to talk about travel. I know it's a big hot button of my wife and I. We've done extensive travel thanks to what we've been able to do over the years online. Obviously, you've had some great success as well with traveling to over 80 countries, and I'm sure you have a ton of adventures that you could share. Why don't you kick us off, if you wouldn't mind? Give us a little bit of your story, how you got started 8 years ago, and just let us know a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually used to be in finance. I was a trader for a proprietary trading firm, first in Amsterdam and then later in Chicago. And 8 years ago, as you mentioned, in 2010, I decided to quit my job as I felt like I wanted something different than, spending most of my life in an office. And so I took off. Initially, I figured I was going to travel maybe for a year and then, find another job, or I thought it was going to be a temporary thing. But 8 years later now, I'm still going strong. I haven't lived in one place for more than 3 months at a time in the last 8 years. And I've been able to find a way to support myself throughout my travels. So it's been a pretty exceptional journey, I would say.
You say you thought you would have been out for only a year, and that seems to be a pretty common phenomenon. I've got actually a good buddy here locally in the Vancouver area, and they headed off for a year, and 2.5 years later, they're still gone, and they have no plans of coming home anytime soon that we can spot. And I know I was talking with Heath Paget, the RV entrepreneur who's traveling the U.S. with his wife in their motorhome, and they were planning to do their honeymoon and spend a little extra time out on the road, and 4.5 years later, they're still on the go. So take us through the early days, if you wouldn't mind. Of course, I want to talk about your podcast, and we'll get to all that, but I know our audience loves to hear the stories, myself included, of the adventures of getting on the road. So let's take it back to 8 years ago when you made that decision to head out. What did you have to kind of organize, and what was your thought process back then?
Well, I guess my thought process in terms of quitting was that I just kind of didn't want to have regrets later of never having tried to, sort of live the life that I wanted to live. And, that was just a kind of a scary thought. And so I kind of felt like I didn't really have an option. I felt like I got to do this now, or it's now or never. That's how I felt like. So, as far as the decision, on the one hand, it was kind of scary to give up a pretty comfortable position that I had at my finance company. But at the same time, I really felt like I had no choice. I had to take my chances. And so, I just sold all my stuff. I canceled my lease and took off for Brazil, spent a couple months there on the beach with no idea what I was going to do. It was a lot of fun. And, one thing that I realized pretty early on is as soon as you leave your job, you have so much time to look around and think about other opportunities that are out there. It's almost like the world opens up. But I knew that I wasn't in a position to just live off my savings for the rest of my life. So I knew there was going to be an end to it. And the possibility of making money online and just being able to support yourself that way, that possibility didn't seem very realistic to me at the time. This is back in 2010 when that was just kind of like a very distant possibility. I didn't know anybody who was doing that at the time. Like nowadays, there's a whole community of digital nomads. I mean, there's conferences, there's communities, there's thousands and thousands of people who are traveling around the world. And I've met hundreds and hundreds of them. But back in the day, I knew about Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. But that was about it. I didn't know anybody else who was actually doing this. And so even though I read the book, it didn't feel like that was something that was realistic to me. It was more like a cool story that I read. And I thought, okay, well, this Tim Ferriss guy really, really got everything down. But I have no idea how to get there. It seemed like almost impossible, especially considering the fact that I had no knowledge of the internet. I didn't know anything about websites. And so all that stuff was completely new to me. So in the beginning, I was just enjoying my time. I wanted to make the most of it. But at the same time, I also started, Googling things like how to make money online and, how to build an internet business and stuff like that. I was definitely wondering where to start. And it was definitely my intention to at least give it a try. But I really didn't think the odds were too high that I was going to succeed at it.
So when you were thinking about this, I assume you were already out on the road. So you left, it sounds like you had some savings tucked aside and you were living off that. Was it when you're out in Brazil or when you're basically out traveling as you decided to learn how to make some money online?
Yeah, I mean, I was living off my savings. I did have an apartment in Amsterdam that I was renting out, but the money, I think I was making about $1,500 a month. And so that wasn't enough to finance my travels. Right. So I was eating into my savings and I had some savings, but not enough for the rest of my life. I mean, not even close. So I knew I could, potentially maybe sit it out for a couple of years, but that would be it. So, I definitely realized I had to find another way to make money or just go back to my old job at some point.
And that's a scary thought, I bet, especially once you've been out on the road for a while.
Exactly. Like, that's the other realization I had after a while. The idea of going back to that office is not very appealing. And so, that kind of like drove me also to seek out more, opportunities. And that's kind of eventually led me to what I'm doing now.
I'm actually on your website, getpaidforyourpad.com, and I'm looking through your podcasting episodes. I can see you're up to episode number 244. And I would assume you obviously are recording these while you're on the road.
That's right. Yes.
Obviously worried about giving up your position at the finance company. I know everybody who has a job that has a nice secure income can relate to that. But you also said something very interesting, that you said you were scared that you wouldn't live the life that you wanted. And I also know that's another thing that many struggle with. In your particular case, you took the leap and out you go, headed off to Brazil and started looking around for ways to develop an online income. And then, so what was basically the next thing that happened?
Yeah, so I tried a lot of different things, and some of these things worked. I mean, I literally had zero knowledge and skills, right? So I literally just Googled how to make money online, and the first thing that popped up, I just tried it, which was, looking back, it was kind of a silly thing. I was just trying to make some money with some Google ads, trying to kind of game the system. Because, you can imagine if you Google how to make money online, like you're going to find some shortcuts and some promises and some big dreams and stuff. But, that's not how you start like a sustainable, valuable business that you're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
So, but I didn't know any better. So that's what I did. And for a couple of years, I tried different things. And, some things actually did make some money, but it was usually like short term. So eventually it wouldn't work anymore. But what was important is during those years, I did learn a lot. I learned how to build a website. I learned about SEO. I learned about, social media, online marketing, like all these different things. I did learn quite a lot, even though I didn't really make much. But that knowledge came in handy when in 2014, I decided to write a book about Airbnb hosting. And the reason that I wrote the book was, in 2012, I learned about Airbnb and I figured I'd give it a shot because I wasn't very happy renting out my apartment to long-term renters. First of all, I wasn't making that much. Secondly, I could never stay at my own place. And then thirdly, it's hard to get people out of your house if you ever want to do something with it. Like if I want to sell my house, it's really tough to get somebody out. In Holland, at least. Maybe in the US it's different, but in my country, it's there's very strict laws around protecting renters.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if I use Airbnb, I'll probably make more money, and I can stay at my own place when I want. Plus, I'm assuming that tourists will go home after a while. They can't stay forever. So it seemed to like kind of solve the three concerns that I had, and it did. It just completely took off. I made easily like 3 times as much renting out on Airbnb than renting out long term, which kind of blew my mind. And not just my mind, also all the minds of all the people that I've talked to while I was traveling who would ask me how I was able to afford my travels.
Yeah.
And I would say, I just rent my apartment on Airbnb. And they'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, Airbnb. And they're like, oh, okay. How many apartments did you have? Like 5 or 10? I'd be like, no, 1.
I've never heard it as a strategy for traveling, and it's brilliant to take your property that you own and rent it out on Airbnb as an income source while you're out there traveling. A lot of people who have homes, head out the door, the house is empty.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. And you know what? Like, there's lots of ways that you can make money with Airbnb, actually. I know people who started with 0 and they didn't even have a house and they just rented a place and rented it out. I know people who started renting out their living room. They just put some mattresses in the living room and started renting that out. I know somebody who slept on the couch for a couple of years renting out her bedroom. There's lots of ways, and there's people who manage other people's units. They don't even have their own Airbnb listing, and they're making money with that. There's lots of ways to do it. In my case, it was pretty straightforward. I had my apartment, and fortunately, during my finance years, I was able to pay off my mortgage, so I didn't have any debt. So all the money I was making was, went straight into my pocket.
I was going to say, so the first thing you did, write the book? Yeah,
so basically I realized that there wasn't very much information on, back in the day. I mean, now there's tons of information, but 4 years ago, there was not much information. And so I kind of had to learn everything from experience, which was great. But at the same time, I thought that it would be very helpful if there was, a comprehensive guide as to how to make it happen, right? And so I figured, okay, well, if that's not out there, then, maybe I should write it. And that's what I did. And the podcast kind of came from that because after I wrote the book, I started thinking, okay, how do I promote it? How do I let people know there's a book? And so I thought it would be really fun to start a podcast and just interview Airbnb hosts from all around the world and, just do it for fun, but also at the same time to promote my book. And then that's where the website came from as well. Initially, just as a place to publish the show notes.
And that's very interesting that you say that, to promote the book. I wrote what was called the Affiliate Marketer's Handbook back in 2002. And I started my other podcast, which I still host to this day, in 2003, called The Affiliate Buzz. And the reason I started The Affiliate Buzz is because the book was doing so well, I needed a way to not only promote it, but to talk to my audience. And back in those days, there were no Facebook or any of the tools that we have today. In your particular case, how have you found, because I know a lot of listeners, they think, okay, how can I make money from a podcast? And obviously you're using it to promote your book. And I also see that you've created some educational courses on the topic. So I'm assuming that's how you're monetizing some of the methods that you're using to monetize online. Can you share some secrets on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, it's pretty hard to make decent money with a book. And that's what I realized pretty early on. Although my book was doing really well, I mean, I looked at the sales stats and I was in the top 2 or 3% of all books on Amazon. But still, it was generating maybe $1,000 a month or something, which is not bad for a book, but still, it's not a sustainable income, right? And so other ways that I monetize is, I do some courses on Udemy, which is an online video course site. It's actually pretty useful. I've taken a lot of courses myself on Udemy. Mm-hmm. But actually the majority of my income actually comes from affiliate deals that I have with people that sell services and products to the Airbnb and short-term rental audience. That's actually been the most profitable part of it all.
Interesting. So these would be property owners who are using Airbnb. You're monetizing through affiliate program. If I could ask, what kind of programs are you running?
Okay, so for example, if you look at my blog at getpaidforyourpet.com/blog, you'll see a bunch of banners on the site, mm-hmm. and these are companies that support Airbnb hosts, that help Airbnb hosts do a better job or make more money. It's an easy example, and also the first company that I ever worked with is a company called Beyond Pricing, and what they do is they set automatic optimized prices for your listing, because pricing an Airbnb listing is actually a fairly complicated matter. Right? Because how do you know what the optimal price is? If you price too high, then you're going to have a too low occupancy to make a lot. And if you price too low, then you're going to have a really high occupancy. But then how do you know that maybe you could price a little higher and not go down in occupancy that much? So it's really like an optimization thing. And that's pretty difficult because there's a lot of factors involved. Also, demand varies over time, right? I mean, in a lot of locations, it's seasonal, even like weekdays versus weekends, special dates. Like, for example, if there's a conference in town or there's a big concert or something that's going to draw in more people. So the pricing aspect is very difficult. And Beyond Pricing is a company that recognized that. And so they hired a bunch of data analysts and they started scraping a bunch of data. They came up with a system where they automatically update the prices in your Airbnb listing every day or even multiple times a day so that your hosts don't have to worry about the pricing anymore. And so obviously they charge a fee for that service. And so I started recommending them to my audience and then collecting a referral fee for everybody that would sign up.
I happen to be on your tools and resources page here. And I assume these are probably affiliate links as well?
A lot of them are, not all of them. So what I try to provide the best information and the best tools out there to my audience. So it's not that I only will list a tool if I'm getting a commission. As you can see on the page, there's a lot of apps out there, right? And so, I mean, there's lots of things. There's there's the pricing apps, there's automated messaging, there's market research, online guidebooks, advanced payments, and there's a lot of management tools as well. So it's the ecosystem around Airbnb and short-term rentals has really kind of exploded in the recent years. And there's just every week I get an email from somebody who's built a new tool, and they're looking to find ways to promote it. So that model just works really well for me because I usually get some sort of discount for my audience. And so it's kind of a win-win situation. I'm providing the information to the audience and then they get a discount and I get a referral fee. And the company's happy too because they're looking for more signups.
You bet. I had a chance to talk with Josh and Joe Stanton over at Screw the 9 to 5, and they have a very interesting story as well. A lot of it is travel and basically lifestyle because of their ability to work online. Just a great story. And in one of the episodes, I chatted with him, and he shared his concept around writing blog posts, and he calls it cornerstone content. And I'm actually looking at one of your pages here now, and this would fall into what he would call cornerstone content, and it's very comprehensive, long copy, blog posts where you share a lot of detail, a lot more than the old days where we used to, write 700 or 800 words. And in this particular case, would you mind talking a little bit about the content that you're creating? Because I can see that it's exceptional and there's some real depth to it and some length. And one of the questions I get all the time is how long should it be when you're writing a blog post? Would you mind addressing that from your perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I had a blog before that I started in 2012, which is kind of just for fun, where I was writing about travel. It's called The Traveling Dutchman. I don't really do much with it anymore now. But one thing that I realized when I looked at my traffic coming in, I noticed that there was a few posts that were responsible for, almost half the traffic. And those happened to be really long posts with a lot of content, videos, just like really useful information and very detailed, comprehensive, just like you said. And so that kind of like set off a little light bulb in my head where I started thinking, hey, what is good content, right? Because there's so much content out there in the world and you're competing with so many other people that are writing. And so, how do you stand out? And I started realizing that, just really picking one topic and then just writing the best piece of content that's out there on that particular topic. So what I would do is I would actually go in Google and find other articles that people have written about the topic, write down all the little tidbits of information that I would get from those articles, combine that with my own experience, and just set the bar high and create a piece of content that's, objectively just the best piece of content that's out there on that particular topic. And that's been a really good way for me to, to build up more traffic to my website.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's actually a strategy that I use personally, is to go out and check out what everybody else is doing who's ranking in the top spot. And then would you say you just basically try to do a better job than they did?
Exactly, yeah. Do a better job. Either be more comprehensive or something that I'm working on really right now is like to improve my design skills, because up until a couple months ago, like my design skills there was definitely room for improvement. So I've really started focusing more on that to make it look good. But the easiest thing is just to make it more comprehensive, right? Or to add more, to add videos to the content, for example, is another way you can improve the content.
Now I'm here with Jasper Ribbers, host of the Get Paid for Your Pad podcast, who's teaching Airbnb hosts how to improve their business. And after just a real quick break, I want to ask Jasper about when he started his podcast, maybe some of the secrets that he learned, and maybe the good old question of what he would do differently if he was starting that podcast over again today. We'll do that and more right after a real quick break.
More podcasting mastery from the Secret Beach Hut studio after this.
Is your website out of date? Is it mobile friendly? Why not let us design your website and we'll make sure it looks the way it should on all platforms and devices, including iPhones, iPads, and other smartphones and tablets. We'll even optimize your site for search engines and make it easy for you to share your content and products on social sites such as Facebook and Twitter with built-in sharing features. For more information and to schedule your no-obligation free consultation, go to podcastingmastery.com/website. Once again, that's www.podcastingmastery.com/website.
Whether you're selling a product or service, looking to fill an event, or communicate with existing clients, a podcast will help you to disseminate information automatically 24/7, saving you time and money. In today's internet world, the sound of a compassionate human being will also help you to stand out, while at the same time garner feelings of trust, generate interest, grab attention, and lead listeners to take your desired action. If you're ready to create a podcast that produces results, James Martell wants to share with you his 21-step podcasting checklist to get you on the fast track to developing your own successful podcast. You can download this enlightening free checklist at podcastingmastery.com/checklist.
Is your podcast getting bogged down because of time or technical issues? Would you prefer to let someone else handle all of the production and technical details? Our virtual producer works remotely from a studio to provide you with production, technical, and creative assistance. Our virtual producer will call you and your guest by phone or Skype, and then record, produce, and upload each episode with SEO-friendly show notes to your website for automated distribution to social media and the major podcast directories. Sound intriguing? Visit podcastingmastery.com/virtual producer to learn more. That's www.podcastingmastery.com/virtual producer.
Now back to Podcasting Mastery from the Secret Beach Hut Studio.
Yes, I'm here with Jasper Ribbers, host of the Get Paid for Your Pad podcast. Now, Jasper, let's go back to when you started your podcast. And of course, you mentioned you'd written the book and then you decided to start a podcast. So what led you to choose podcasting maybe over other forms? Why did you start your show?
I started it as a way to promote my book. After I published my book on Amazon, I knew I had a pretty good boost in the beginning in terms of sales, but I was expecting it to kind of drop off if I wouldn't do something to promote it. And so I thought, you know what? Let's start a podcast. It sounds fun. I like talking to people. I also wanted to learn from other Airbnb hosts. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to interview Airbnb hosts and learn from them and share that with my audience. So that was really the reason why I got started. And this is right after I published my book.
So when you got started, take us back to the steps that you took. Because, of course, when we're getting started, it's like, okay, I got to get a microphone. What kind of microphone? How am I going to record this? Am I going to interview guests? Am I not going to interview guests? And so on. Then you record your first 10 episodes and you hate them all. Like all of that stuff. Where were you when you started your show? How was it unfolding for you?
I would say that the technical aspects were fairly simple. I just Googled and I actually found a site, the Entrepreneur on Fire. It's a very well-known site. John Lee Dumas is his name, I think. He's very successful. And so he has a guide that really describes step by step how to set up the podcast. And that was kind of the easy part, just setting it up. I would say the hard part is how do you grow your audience, right? But I'd say if I were to advise somebody who's looking to start a podcast, I'd say the first thing is pick a very small niche, because it's very hard to compete with other podcasters that already have been doing it for a while. So if you pick a very specific topic that no one really talks about, then you have a much better chance of getting some traction early on. Secondly, there's a thing on iTunes, iTunes is, I guess, the biggest source of traffic, at least for me and probably for most podcasts. And the first, I can't remember if it's 6 or 8 weeks, but you get a window where you can make it to the new and noteworthy section. And in order to get there, I think they look at downloads and they look at the number of reviews. So some of the things that I did is, I can just ask all my friends to subscribe for the podcast and to download, all my episodes. I started with around 5 or 10. So that when 10 people download 10 episodes, that's 100 downloads, right? Whereas you start with one podcast, then that's only 10. So that's why I started with, I immediately published a number of podcasts. And I asked my friends to not only download, but also to write me a review. And, that really helped because soon enough I was in the new and noteworthy section. And so that's a little strategy that people can use. And, in terms of growing your audience, because in the last 4 years, I've actually had different phases. I had phases where I was like very consistent with my podcasting, but I also had phases where, I just wasn't focusing on it so much. So I was focusing on other stuff and I kind of dropped the ball a bit. Mm-hmm. And what I've really seen is that it's very important to be consistent. And so I think the consistency in not just in the number of podcasts that you publish, but also, when you publish it and also kind of the length of your show. And so what I would advise people is think about how many podcasts per month can you do realistically and set kind of a certain time, like 30, whether it's 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I think the 30-minute mark is pretty good because what I've noticed is a lot of people listen to my podcast in the car on their way to work. And so between 20 and 40 minutes is probably a typical commute. And so I think that's a pretty good time, and be consistent. Just every week do one, or every week do two, or even if you do once a month, just do publish it on the same day, the first of every month on the first, so that people know what to expect from you. So I'd say those would be my tips.
I interviewed a wonderful woman named Betty, and she's a flight attendant, and she interviews other flight attendants and the pilots and the ground crew. about funny stories that happen on airplanes. And honestly, she is just a riot. And she shared a ton about her show. But you mentioned monthly. I never met anybody who had a monthly show. And her show is once a month. And she averages 45,000 downloads per episode. And she's done incredibly well with it. And she's so funny. And her podcast is called Betty in the Sky with a Suitcase. It's good that you mentioned consistency. And I think we all fall away a little bit once in a while. Maybe not everybody, but I know I have. And you can always pick it up again and get going. But it's good that you mentioned consistency and that you mentioned maybe a monthly show. So in your particular case, what would you say would be a mistake you made, if there was a mistake at the beginning, or something that you would have done differently back then, knowing what you know now?
Well, I'd say that the consistency is probably the number one thing that I would have done differently, because what I realized is that you look at shows that are really popular, and before I started, I always thought success comes from having a great idea, or it comes from being really good at something. And over the years, by looking at other people who are successful, I've just realized it's not really that. It's more about just putting in the work, being consistent, and slowly building your audience. And so looking back in 4 years, like I said, I have so many different phases, especially when I'm, because I'm traveling. It's sometimes the Wi-Fi doesn't work, or I'm really jet lagged and I don't feel like recording a podcast or something. So I'd say the number one thing that I would have done differently is just, like I said, just pick how many podcasts you can realistically do, and then just stick to it consistently and don't change it. Just stick with it. And also recording podcasts in advance, because I've had many times where I kind of dropped the ball because I had to publish a podcast on Monday, but then I'm on some island in the Philippines or something, and the internet doesn't work, and I'm there for 2 weeks. And it's just like, I get on Skype, and it's just like it continuously cuts out. And then suddenly I realize, okay, well, I don't think I can do any podcasts the coming 2 weeks. Now, if I would have prepared for that, then I could have recorded, 4 podcasts a couple of weeks earlier, and then, kind of have those in the can. Being more organized. I've never really been that organized. Just having a schedule, just making sure that you schedule all the interviews sometime in advance, because people cancel as well, right? I've had multiple times where I didn't publish my podcast because the interviewee canceled. Yeah. So, you got to be prepared for those things. And I think if you organize it well, it's definitely doable, even when you're traveling like me, but it takes a little bit of structure and organization.
How have you found being a guest on other people's shows? Like obviously you're a guest today on Podcasting Mastery. How have you found that as a strategy for promoting your own show?
Oh, I think that's a great strategy. Getting in front of other people's audiences is probably the best way to grow the audience, I would say. I've been on a lot of other podcasts, and I always really appreciate it when people reach out to me, because I need guests for my podcast. And so, it saves me work if other people reach out to me and say, hey, I've been hosting for 4 years. I've done this and that. And maybe it's interesting for your show. And a lot of times it is interesting. So yeah, I always reach out. I always ask. I look at podcasts that are somewhat relevant to mine, or either in the travel niche, or even if it's not completely relevant. I mean, I think Airbnb is a topic that anyone can do it, really. Because everybody has a house, whether you're renting or your own, whether you can rent out a room or your entire house when you're on holiday, or you put an airbed in the living room if you're a little short for cash for a couple months. It's really like almost anybody can do Airbnb. So it's kind of a topic that could be relevant, even if the podcast is about a different subject. So I look at the guests that have been on the podcast in the past. And if I know somebody who's been on the podcast, then I'll reach out to that person and say like, hey, could you send me a quick intro? And I think that's also how I ended up being a guest on your show, James. So yeah, so I think it's a great strategy.
That's great. Let's talk about your travel and your adventures. Then we're going to jump into a quick speed round after that. But what's it like to be out on the road for 8 years? Give us some insight into that. I've never done it. I've been a married guy for my whole life and had kids early on, and we went that route. We've done a lot of travel, but it's usually 2-3 weeks and then we're back. What you're doing is a whole different animal. And I think there's a lot of people that would love to do it. But in your particular case, though, so kind of give us, what's the lifestyle like doing what you do?
Well, I'd say the best thing about it is just having the freedom and being able to take advantage of opportunities as they come by. Just to give you a quick example, a couple months ago, I heard from one of my podcast listeners that there were some good opportunities in Egypt to invest, and they were selling like apartments on the sea near the beach, like for like $5,000-$10,000. And so 2 weeks later, I was in Egypt and I was looking at apartments there, right? And that's something that I love about this lifestyle, just having the freedom to decide last minute to hop on a plane and go somewhere. So that's the best part. I mean, it comes with challenges too. I've already mentioned it's hard to be productive if you're constantly on the move. In terms of equipment, for example, I'm carrying around, I've got like 2 laptops, I've got, the microphone, a couple stands and stuff. Like, you need some equipment. So you're carrying that stuff around. Quite often I lose something. I leave behind so much stuff in Airbnbs and hotel rooms. And then you don't realize it until you need it. So, obviously there's the jet lags and there's, spending a lot of time in airplanes and airports and stuff. It's just challenge. It definitely hurts productivity. Yeah. I can really tell that if I stay put for 2 or 3 months in one location, I just get so much more done than if I'm moving around every week or two. Now, because you just need a little time to settle in, right? You're gonna get a local SIM card. You're gonna find a gym, find some places that you like to go for lunch. You wanna, find the supermarket. Like this, it's just there's a little setup process every time you arrive in a new destination. So I've actually decided to move more towards the slow travel. So really stay put for 2 or 3 months in every place and don't move around too much, because it is challenging. As much fun as it is, it's also challenging.
Do you have a favorite place that you've been?
I have some favorite places. I wouldn't say there's one favorite place, because I think that every location has something going for it. And so it's more like there's different categories of favorite places, so to speak. So for example, I'm a big scuba diver. I love scuba diving. And I would say, Indonesia is amazing for scuba diving. I also really like, beautiful beaches and kite surfing. And so, for example, a place like the Philippines is one of my favorite places too, because in the Philippines, I mean, the beaches are just unchallenged. I mean, you can throw a stone and you hit like a beautiful white sand beach, and there's hardly anyone there. Wow! If there is even someone there, I mean, the country consists of 7,000 islands, and it's just beautiful. So, some other examples. Brazil is definitely one of my favorite countries, and that's more to do with the people, the culture. Like, Brazilians are super fun to hang out with. They have a very positive energy. In general, I like South American culture, and the people are quite warm, and they're very welcoming, hospitable. So, countries like Colombia is one of my favorites. The list goes on, right? Yeah. But I would say, like, in terms of some of my favorite places, I would definitely say Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Colombia. Those are really kind of my top spots.
Wow, exceptional. All right, so let's do this. Let's jump into a quick speed round, and then we will wrap her up. Very important questions, 10 of them in total. Very complicated questions. Number 1, Windows or Mac?
Mac.
Podcasters are Mac users for sure. No question about it. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Cat or dog person?
Dog.
Most recently read book?
I gotta think about that, because I'm doing audiobooks mostly. The most recent audiobooks that I'm listening to is called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday.
What's it about?
It's an amazing book. It's basically what they did is they went through all the meditations and lectures of the old ancient Roman and Greek philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, and they've kind of combined the most important lessons into a book and an audiobook that has 365 meditations. And so you can do one every day. And it just amazes me that these people lived thousands of years ago, but they already had the answers to most of the questions in life that we struggle with in our modern time. Yeah. It's really super insightful. I love it.
It's amazing how we sometimes think that because they came before us, they weren't very smart. And that's completely not true.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you listen to the Daily Stoic, every chapter is just a couple minutes, but you can spend the whole day thinking about the concept and trying to understand it because, these guys were smart. There's no doubt about it.
Brilliant. Okay, this is kind of one you've already answered, but we'll do it one more time. Just a real quick one. Favorite vacation spot?
I'd say Philippines.
Philippines, okay. Favorite podcast?
The Peter Schiff Show.
Peter Schiff Show?
Yeah, the Peter Schiff Show.
What's he talk about?
Well, he talks a lot about economics and finance, and that's just a topic that I find very interesting. Given my background, I studied econometrics in university. He's a little bit controversial, which I kind of enjoy because his opinions are just very different than when you hear in the mainstream. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I find him a very interesting guy.
Would you consider yourself a techie or a non-techie?
A non-techie.
What's an online tool you use every single day that you absolutely hate to live without? Have to live without?
Headspace.
What is that?
Headspace is an app that allows you to do meditations. And it's a great app. It has a daily meditation. It has all these different meditations about different topics. Every meditation is in has different lengths. So you can choose whether you want to do the 3 minute or the 5 minute or the 10 minute. And it just basically allows you to take a few minutes out of your day and unwind and listen. These are guided meditations, and it just really helps me to quiet my mind. But at the same time also, it's very educational because the meditations, there's always some lesson in there as well. So I think it's just a great, amazing practice for me. It really helps me to every day, do a meditation, and this app just makes it so simple.
What do you do for fun? That's a good one to you.
Kitesurfing.
Perfect. Last one, number 10. What's the most rewarding thing you've been able to do for someone else because of your podcast?
I would say hearing from people who've been able to use Airbnb to really change their life. I had guests on my show who, for example, saved their house. They were getting foreclosed and they were able to keep their house because of Airbnb. And I think, in general, having a positive impact on someone else's life is probably the most fulfilling thing you can do. And so, yeah, I think it's pretty impactful.
It's great. So tell us about your book again, your courses, and where our listeners can learn more about what you have to offer.
Absolutely. I guess the best place to go is getpaidforyourpad.com. And there you can find every single podcast I've ever recorded. You can listen on the website, or you can sign up in iTunes or any other device that you use to listen to podcasts. I also have a YouTube channel with lots of videos. So you can check that out. It's also called Get Paid for Your Pad. My book is on Amazon. I mean, if you Google Get Paid for Your Pad, then you're going to find all sorts of information. But the website, the .com website, is probably the best way to start.
That's great. Jasper, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me on, James.
You betcha. We'll look forward to getting you back one day. We are now out of time. If you happen to miss something that Jasper mentioned today, and he did cover a lot of ground, or maybe you just like to review what he talked about, keep in mind we do keep all the show notes for you, including links to everything that was mentioned. And you can find the show notes for this particular episode at podcastingmastery.com/PM070. Also, a little heads up for those who are interested in further increasing your podcasting revenues, a little shout out to my other podcast, The Affiliate Buzz, where we've been recording episodes since way back in 2003. It's probably the longest running podcast, quite frankly, on the planet. And we just recently published episode number 500. And you may want to check that out. It was a very special episode with 8 of the top industry leaders in the affiliate marketing space joining us to give us a shout out and to share their number one tip for making money with affiliate programs, something that Jasper, of course, shared today as well. And I'd like to invite you to listen in and subscribe at jamesmartell.com. Also, a quick reminder that if you haven't subscribed to the Affiliate Buzz and you happen to be on iTunes or one of the podcasting directories, on our new YouTube channel, or maybe on our own website, please do take a moment and click the subscribe button to fast track your efforts to becoming a top-notch podcaster. Jasper, thank you again, and to all of our podcasting friends, we'll catch you in the next episode of Podcasting Mastery.
Thanks for joining us on the Secret Beach Hut Studio. If you are ready to start your podcasting adventure and to learn the secrets of podcasting your way to a stress-free lifestyle, go ahead and download the free Podcasting Mastery Checklist at podcastingmastery.com/checklist and start your adventure today. But don't wait, the checklist won't be free for long, so be sure to grab your free copy today at podcastingmastery.com/checklist.